Queen's the Queen Student Alumni Association's panel, Women of Influence, the Global Political Economy. On behalf of the entire executive team, we are incredibly excited to have you here all today. My name is Shasha Vijayratna, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm a fourth year in the Geography and Planning Department, and I'm the Director of Student Transition. Before we begin, please make sure that your mics are muted and your cameras are turned off. On behalf of the Queen Student Alumni Association, I would like to begin by acknowledging our presence on Indigenous lands across Turtle Island from wherever you may be accessing this event. While all of us here are encouraged to honor the history of the land from your respective location, it is my responsibility to reflect about QSAA and the privileges we experience as a result of a colonial project. Queen's University and the organization that represent this institution have deep colonial roots. And it is only through colonialization and destruction that I have the ability to learn, work, and play on these lands and waterways. We need to be open to the truths of the past and be willing to listen, learn, and attempt to understand our own positions and what has come to us as a result of those who came before. I urge us all to consider our own positionality as we gather online today. As we all join in from different locations, I would like to remind everyone to please carefully follow our code of conduct. Once again, we ask that all participants please keep their cameras turned off and stay muted during the session. During the Q&A portion, questions can be directed to Samara through the chat function if you do not want to turn on your camera through the raised hand function. If your hand is raised, you will be called upon, at which point please turn on your camera and mic before you proceed. The questions can be directed to the entire panel or a specific panelist. This session will be recorded so that students who are unable to attend the live session will be able to watch after. We remind everyone to be respectful and have a safe discussion. And now we are going to begin the panel portion of our event, and I will hand it off to our moderator, Samara Lejim.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Shasha. Thank you. My name is Samara Lejim, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm this year's Director of Giving for the Queen Student Alumni Association. I'm also a third-year politics major. Some other clubs on campus that I'm a part of are Queen's Female Leadership in Politics, where I'm the External Advocacy Coordinator. I'm the Director of Student Affairs Research for ASIS, and I'm the Deputy of Education in the AMS Social Issues Commission. Like many other people here today, my interests include politics, social justice, and civic engagement, so I'm really excited to be the moderator for this incredible panel with such an interesting group of professionals. So with that being said, let's meet our accomplished panelists. Our first panelist is Rithika Sitsabaiesan. Rithika is an experienced leader, renowned Canadian politician, educator, and activist. Currently, Rathika serves as a professor at Centennial College in postgraduate certificate programs with the Business School. Rathika completed her undergraduate degree at both the University of Toronto and Carleton University, where she served as the Vice President of the Tamil Students Association, the Operations Manager at the Rideau River Residents Association, Vice President of the Carleton University Students Association, and Caucus Chair of the new university government. In addition, she holds a master's degree in industrial relations here at Queen's University. Previously, Rathika served as a member of parliament from 2011 to 2015. There, Rathika became the first Tamil Canadian to be elected to the House of Commons. In her time as a member of parliament, Rathika broke multiple historic barriers. She became the first female member of parliament to represent Scarborough-Rouge River, and only the second Tamil woman to be elected to any federal parliament outside India or Sri Lanka, and was the youngest member of the 41st Parliament of Canada. Rathika specializes in topics ranging from gender-based violence, education, civic engagement, politics, and strengthening people management. Since her move from a career in politics to education, Rathika continues to be involved in her local community and engaged with leaders across the Greater Toronto Area. Our second speaker is Avery Johnston. Avery is a researcher, content creator, and digital strategist. Having graduated from on the Dean's List from Queen's University with an honors Bachelor of Arts in Health Studies, Avery works at Kite to conduct research and create content with clients, as well as elevate Kite's branding and growth. Avery's areas of expertise lie in the intersections of gender, health, and climate research, through leadership and engagement strategy. Previously, Avery has served as a youth ambassador to the United Nations Population Fund, or UNFPA, on topics of sexual and reproductive health and rights, and has sat on the board of directors for regional branch of the Canadian Mental Health Association. She has also worked with the Queen's Health Outreach to develop mental and sexual health curriculum for students in Georgetown, Guyana, and spent 2 months implementing this initiative alongside the Guyanese Ministry of Education and Guyana Responsible Parenthood Association in May and June of 2019. Avery currently sits on the Canadian Council of Young Feminists, or Conseil Canadien des Jeunes Féministes, an initiative by Canadian Senator Mary-Lou McFadden, and is a young leader with Women's Deliver Young Leaders program. Since her transatlantic move from Toronto to London, Avery has been enjoying exploring the city and its many cultural coves, taking a French course at King's College London, and attending live music gigs. And last but not least, our next panelist is Alexandra Petrae. Alex is a strategy manager who likes to wear many hats in her work. She speaks 3 languages, including Romanian, Spanish, and English. She graduated from Queen's University with an honors Bachelor of Arts in History and Politics in 2012. During her time at Queen's, she was part of the Queen's International Affairs Association, Queen's Foreign Policy Conference, International Students Welcoming Committee, and was also a Don in her 4th year. Previously, Alexandra served as an associate for the Embassy of Canada in Washington, D.C. She then worked as a strategy consultant in London with Accenture and later with BlackRock's Financial Markets Advisory. She has certifications in sustainable investing and business strategy. She's also spent significant time abroad in Singapore at the National University of Singapore for an academic exchange, and later on for consulting work, and in India, where she worked as a business development associate for the company Babajob. Alexandra is currently the general manager for Bird Canada and is an advisor to multiple Canadian venture builders. She's also obtained her master's in development studies at the University of Oxford in England. Alexandra has recently been enjoying the great outdoors as much as possible, whether hiking or trail running. I am very excited to hear from this incredible panel. So now we are going to dive into the moderated panel. If you have any questions, please be sure to save them for the end, for the Q&A portion. So I'm going to start with the first question. What has helped you get to the place you are now? And what advice would you give others who are hoping to follow in a similar direction? So we're going to go in the order of Avery, Alex, and then Rithika.
Well, thanks so much, Samara, and thank you so much for having me. This is such an honor to be invited to this, and thank you to all the students who have tuned in, because I know that this is your evening as well. What has helped me get to where I am? A number of different things, and so it's not quite a clear-cut answer, which I apologize for, but I will be hopefully concise. I think there are a few things that really supported my journey to where I am now. I'm obviously dialing in from the UK, which is why I've got a big lamp in front of me because it is very dark out. The first one would certainly be mentorship, both formally and informally. There are a number of people, men and women in my life, and like I said, professionally and otherwise, who have kind of helped guide me along the journey to where I am right now. Those are people that I can go to for questions, for answers, for trying to figure things out, and for from whom I'm really grateful. So that would be certainly my first point, is really try to find mentors personally and professionally that will help guide you and who will answer your questions and give you that time. But secondly, I think it's just a huge sense of curiosity. I'm sure we'll get into this probably later in the panel, but I have quite an unconventional way of how I found my role in the UK, and how it kind of found me, but very much aligned to what I was interested in. So I think just asking questions and reaching out to people and shooting your shot, for lack of a better description, is probably what helped get me to where I am.
Perfect. Should I go ahead?
Great. So thanks everyone for having me as well. I will probably echo a little bit of what Avery said, in that I also have a very unconventional path to getting where I am today. So I think in terms of what really helped me get here, first and foremost is never being afraid to explore. So as Samara said, I have a degree in politics and history, and I ended up working in business for the past decade or so, which basically means that I followed my sense of curiosity, and I was never afraid of putting my hand up to do something, even if I didn't know exactly how to do it. But I believed in myself that I could learn how to do it. So I ended up in very, very different area of work than I intentionally trained for. And I think you shouldn't be afraid of that. And it's not a sign of failure in the least, but it's a sign of curiosity, and a sign that you're following your true self, and you're figuring out what exactly you're good at doing, and also enjoy how to do. So I think that's the first bit of advice. And I guess the second would be to have a really strong group of friends around you, whether they're male or female. It doesn't necessarily matter, but I think people who support you and challenge you along the way, and help you believe in yourself, especially when you're taking these steps, which sometimes can seem a little bit out of the left field. But people who support you while doing that are crucial to ensure that you can find your true passion. And it might not be exactly what you thought it was when you were in university, and that's totally okay, and you should definitely go for it.
All right, I guess it's my turn now. Thank you, Avery and Alex and Samara and everybody else for joining us today and for inviting me to be part of this panel. My name is Rathika, and what has helped me to get on the path that I'm on, and where I'm still figuring out my path, to be honest, as to where I'm headed. I'm blazing the trail as I keep on going, because I'm not sure exactly where I want to go yet. I'm figuring that out. What has helped me is asking questions. What Avery and Alex said, I echo both of them, but what I can add to what they've said is to ask questions of myself, as well as anybody around me, and also to challenge power, challenge authority, or challenge people who are in those positions who who maybe say, well, no, not you, or no, not that can't be done. And my favorite word in the world is why. If you can't answer that question for me, then you mean nothing to me, and I'm going to figure out a way to do it. That's kind of how I operate, how I have operated since I was a young child to now as a mother. It's really just asking that why question. Why do I want to do something? Why is this barrier here? Why is this door open? Whatever. Ask that question, why. And I didn't do anything alone. Nothing in my life have I done alone. It's whether it's mentors, support, friends, family. It's knowing that I have a tribe, that's there for me to lean on if I need to stand on if that's what I need, to push me ahead if that's what I need, but knowing that I have a tribe and that I'm not alone. That's all I got for now. Samara, it's up to you. Back to you.
Thank you so much. The three of you gave such authentic advice, and I'm sure that everybody was able to learn something from your diverse paths. That was incredible. So the next question is, by nature of being able to sit in this room and be part of this discussion, we are all afforded an immense amount of privilege. Michelle Obama once said that when you have worked hard enough and done well and have walked the door of opportunity, you do not slam it shut behind you. You reach back and you give other folks the same chances that helped you succeed. So what is a way that you think we can all aid in mentorship? The order for this question is Alex, Rithika, Avery.
Definitely a great question, but also a very hard one. So I think you have to, first of all, honor your own sense of self and know how you are best able to give advice, and make sure that it's authentic, and make sure that you are actually helping someone if they want to be helped. So from my own experience, having spent many years now in a variety of corporate structures, I would say you'll find that a lot of the times they're very well-defined programs to be able to give back and to help.
But sometimes those are not necessarily the most authentic or genuine programs to actually be able to do so. So I think the most interesting and real way to actually help someone is to offer yourself and to be open for people to ask for your help, because that's fundamentally the best way you can create a mentorship relationship with someone, or actually create a connection with someone, which will help them more in the long term. By ensuring that you're open for any question, you're open for any situation, and you're able to give your advice and your view from a non-judgmental point of view, and really understand what the other person is going through. So I guess to summarize my long-winded answer is, there's many formal channels to do this, and you should always try to participate in those, though they're great. But to be able to move outside of those, I think just always be open, be approachable. You never know who's looking at you thinking, oh, I wish I was like them. And I think, it begs for reflection of how many times I've looked at someone and said, oh, I wish one day I would be like them. So make yourself be open, and you never know who you're going to inspire, but you also never know who you can help by being just approachable and genuine.
I don't have too much more to add to Alex's comment there. It was fantastic, Alex. Everything Alex was saying, I was like, yeah, totally resonated. What I can add is the element of be real, and if somebody does talk to you, or make yourself available, like Alex said, and if someone reaches out to you and you're able to help them, let them know. If you're not, then be true to yourself and true to that person. Don't waste their time. Because I've had opportunities or instances where people have come to me and said, I worked with a mentor for a while, but I didn't really think I was going anywhere because I couldn't really meet, or mentor didn't push me, or whatever. And it's important when you're establishing these mentorship relationships. When I'm saying establishing, that means it's a formal mentorship relationship. It's very important to set out guidelines or boundaries or parameters and expectations. What do you expect of your mentor, and what can they expect from you? Because if you just say, hi, will you be my mentor? And they say, sure. And then we don't know what that looks like. It's hard to actually help you. When I take on people in a formal mentorship relationship, I outright ask them, what do you expect from me? And how much effort are you willing to put in? How often do you want to check in? All of those things are, I think, important to establish in advance, so that you can have the level of relationship and the depth of relationship that you want to have from your mentor. You can also have very informal mentorship relationships with your colleagues. It doesn't have to be somebody who has come long before you. Your mentor could be your colleague. Your mentor could be your subordinate. It doesn't matter, position doesn't matter, or the positional power doesn't matter in who you're in choosing your mentor. Choose people who have the values that you aspire to have in yourself, or have similar values in yourself that you see in yourself, and have those be the guiding principles in how you approach your life, as well as including choosing your own mentor. Not sure if I answered the question there, Samara, but let me know.
No, you did. Thank you.
Well, thank you both. I very much echo, I feel like this conversation will be a lot of, oh, I echo this and I echo that, because we seem to be on very similar pages with a lot of this. So thank you both for those answers. Rathika, to really echo what you were saying, I think one thing I have found really beneficial in some of my mentor relationships, both formally and informally, and particularly coming right out of school, and I've only been out of university for almost 2 years now, not even, is actually finding a mentor who's maybe like 1 or 2 steps ahead of me. There's a huge age range of people, between the Greta Thunbergs and the Michelle Obamas of this world, of a lot of people who are doing really amazing work. And so your mentor doesn't have to be, you know, the CEO of a company or the, you know, the person in the job that you want. It can be the person who's also on an interesting path, or the person who, whose path you admire, or exactly like Rithika said, to, you know, the person whose values align to yours, who might be able to help you get from where you are, you know, point A to point B, as opposed to point A to point Z. And those people are really quite fun as well, because there's this level of, you know, relative and familiarity that they understand quite closely, perhaps what you're going through, because they, you know, maybe that was them last year or them 3 years ago versus them 20 years ago. So I think that that is something that I've really valued I mean, I can think of one person really off the top of my head who's a colleague of mine, who I work with very closely, who has kind of taken me under her wing in that way. So I would say that. And then I would say, as my second point, just ask questions. And that goes, I think, for both mentees and mentors. I have a few people in my life who I have formal and informal mentee relationships with as well. And I love asking them questions, because they bring a very diverse perspective to my life and give me a different outlook on things, and are able to answer some of my questions based on their lived experiences and their education and their, you know, their work. So don't underestimate the value that you, perhaps as a mentee, also bring to the conversation, and ask of them, you know, what they should ask of you, what you ask of them, in terms of that kind of reciprocity in that relationship, I think is helpful. So find someone that you can banter with back and forth a little bit, would be my best advice.
Okay, thank you so much. That definitely taught me that mentorship can look a lot of different ways, definitely not the traditional sense. And that was great advice on not how to just be or find a mentor, but how to be a good one. So thank you. Our next question is, what did your transition from undergrad or your master's look like to your career? Was there anything specific during your undergrad or your master's that inspired you to follow the path that you did? So for this order, it's Rathika, Avery, and then Alexandra.
Thanks, Mara. So I don't know my path. I'm still figuring it out. So during my time in university, I was very active in the extracurricular world, whether that's being a Don at Queen's, involved with the students associations or student governments, whether it's running for election, helping other people, being in staff position while I was an undergraduate student, whatever that was, all of that definitely helped me in my post-university world. Actually, I'm actually back in university now. I'm a student again. So I guess you never really finish being a student. I finished my master's, and then I went to work for the Provincial Labor Board as a conciliator that was directly in the same field of industrial relations, being that conflict resolution person for labor and management in the province of Ontario. And then as things would happen, my big mouth that I don't know how to keep quiet sometimes, or remember that why question, if you can't answer it, I challenge you. So that's what I did with my manager at the labor board, and apparently he felt threatened and decided that on the Monday, I was basically told that I was getting a promotion. And then on the Wednesday, I was told that I was being terminated because I challenged authority and challenged, I guess, his management style. I'm not sure what it was, but it was not very professional. It wasn't very clear as to why, but I thank him for not extending my employment there, because it allowed me to reflect as to what was important for me and opened up the door, really, because I was unemployed for a long time. I was even more active in my community social justice work that I was doing. And I was speaking at a panel on employment equity, employment insurance reform and employment equity at Ryerson University. And that's where the candidate search committee members found me. They were in the audience, and that's what ended up with our conversation starting about me being a candidate in the next election that was to come. That was the third time I was asked to run as a federal candidate, but that was the first time that I took it seriously and decided that I would run and win in that election. So I'm grateful that he fired me, or didn't renew my contract, let's go with. So definitely my education helped. Sorry, that's my 3-year-old. My education helped me to walk that path, but my extracurriculars is what really, I think, prepared me for my life in politics. Understanding how elections work at the university level, and working with the Canadian Federation of Students and helping other universities and colleges with setting up their governance structures. Maya, s'il te plaît, non, s'il te plaît, Maya, pas maintenant, merci, Maya. Sorry, this is what happens when you're in my home. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No worries.
You lose trains of thoughts. Yeah, I'm gonna stop. If something comes up, I'll come back, and maybe when somebody else is speaking, I can deal with Miss Maya here. Now everyone knows my daughter is Maya.
Am I up next? I can't remember the order. Is it me? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Firstly, Rathika, do not apologize for your daughter, because I am jealous of all the tiny humans in the background of everyone's Zoom videos. And I work with a lot of amazing and powerful women and in these different spaces. So please don't apologize, because this is the reality of working from home. And it is something that women always apologize for. And I am not in a position, I don't have children. It's not something, I don't even have a cute dog running through my Zoom calls, unfortunately. But it is something that I consistently try to make a point of please don't feel like you have to apologize, because this is real life, and potentially you wouldn't be apologizing if you were a different gender. So
of course, for sure. Thank you for that. And I appreciate that. I
no.
do for everybody else, but I am also Canadian, right? So, and a woman.
I know it's like a double negative. I'm now living in the UK, when I work with so many international groups and different people, they're always like, you always apologize for everything. I'm like, it's because I'm really nice and Canadian, actually. But please, yeah, that is one thing that you shouldn't have to apologize for. To be quite brief, so it's kind of, I don't know if this is maybe the right time to actually describe how I got to where I am. Samara, you can cut me off if this is maybe not the right moment for it. But in terms of things that kind of parts of my undergrad that helped support my transition from undergrad to work are certainly extracurriculars. I did my undergrad in health studies with SKHS at Queen's, and I really enjoyed it. There were a lot of elements of health studies that I really, had quite a lot of fun with, and really narrowed a lot of that research into looking at the intersection of gender and health. And so it really was aligned in that way to what I do now. But I never knew that the job that I have now existed. I actually didn't know that companies did what the company that I work for does. And so it was really kind of a weird path to how I got to where I am, and certainly to how I moved across an ocean right after university. But extracurriculars in that way really did set the tone for my interests, and those kind of nuanced interests, particularly at those intersections of gender and various social, political, and economic challenges. Things like QFlip, which I know a number of people on this call are on. So Queen's Female Leadership in Politics, Queen's Health Outreach, which I know another few people on this call are on as well. As well as I was on the exec for Vogue Charity Fashion Show for a number of years. And so really just those large scale clubs, which I think at Queen's we forget are so big and much bigger than a lot of other universities. So don't discredit that these organizations are massive, particularly, I guess, Vogue being the largest undergraduate charity fashion show in Canada. But that they also not only teach you to nuance those kind of interest areas, but also teach you just teamwork in general, and how to work with other people, how to work with volunteers. All of those are volunteer organizations, and that is a completely different management of your peers than it is working in a corporate environment or in a firm. You know, you're all the same age, there's power dynamics, there's politics, there's personal drama that always gets in the way. And navigating all of that is really, really useful. And although it may seem really challenging at the time, I feel like those clubs and organizations, far more than what I learned, you know, I learned a lot of valuable things in SKHS, don't get me wrong. But those kind of relationship management skills, you know, events management in a way, project management, and that all translated, I think, really, really directly to what I have the great, you know, privilege of doing now, compounded with the kind of hard research skills that I have and now use all the time. So in terms of kind of what got me, what was useful from undergrad and transitioning into the workforce, particularly because I didn't do a master's and didn't do a professional degree, I think that those extracurriculars in combination with what I was taught in the classroom really allowed me to excel in an environment that, like I said, I actually didn't know existed. So it's funny how those things come together and kind of led me to a path that is very, very aligned to what I'm interested in and hopefully what I'm good at. I mean, I can't be the judge of that one, so.
Okay, I guess I'll go. I apologize in advance because I'm very passionate about this topic. So I probably will sound like I am, you know, just like incredibly knowledgeable about it or just too passionate about it. So I do apologize. But I think we forget that the Canadian educational system is actually outstanding. And I think we forget that the university experience in itself, and especially at Queen's, we have such strong academics, but we also have so many other opportunities in that environment, which are very unique, actually, when you compare it to the British educational system, which I did my master's in, when you compare it to the South Asian educational system, which I spent a year in. A lot of folks in those educational environments are very much focused on just studying, first of all. That's all they do. Second, they usually don't have jobs on the side. You know, I worked in the tea room. I know lots of people have, you know, they work in Kogrow, they work in other jobs on campus. People did not have the experience of holding down jobs while studying, which, by the way, is a great time management skill, which you will never learn to the same degree during your first job than if you actually learn it in university. That's such a huge, huge benefit to learning that ahead of time. And also the concept of extracurriculars is actually foreign to most people. I think in Canada, we're actually trained even from high school most of the time to get involved. And while there is some element of glorifying people who are involved in everything, I totally recognize that, and it can be a trap. The fact that we are, you know, involved in so many things gives us the opportunity to not only manage different priorities and manage our own time when we have conflicting priorities and conflicting deadlines, but it also helps us really understand how to prioritize and how to allocate only 1 hour to do a task because I have an exam tomorrow and I need to do lots of work for that. So that skill is invaluable. And I think we're so lucky in the Canadian system, and especially at Queen's, because we're kind of forced to learn it, to be perfectly honest, right? Like you have a shift at the coffee house and then you have to go to the library to do something, and then you have a lab, and then you have something else. Like you have to organize yourself. And I think there's so many people I've met in my professional life. There's so many people I met through academics that do not have that skill, and they are still struggling in their 30s to learn it. And we have it given on a platter, and not to take advantage of it is almost a crime. So I'm really, really passionate about this. Once again, I apologize. I'm not trying to come off that strong, but it's just invaluable skills that are basically handed to us. And I think that is the most helpful thing that has allowed me to do well in my career. I can manage my time. I can manage conflicting priorities. And the other thing that's really important is everything you do in a Canadian educational system matters, right? You don't just like write essays for an entire year into the ether, no one cares, no one's marking them, and then at the end you write one exam. That's what happens in the UK, by the way. You study our entire year, no one cares, and then you write one exam and that's your entire grade. So imagine what that does for your work-life balance. Imagine what that does for your work ethic. Whereas in Canada, you know, every assignment, every tutorial, every quiz, every single thing matters. And that teaches you to be consistent. And that's super important because at work, you have to be consistent. You can't procrastinate for a week and then show up to one meeting, impress your boss, and you get a promotion. That doesn't work. So that consistency is tremendous. And I think, you know, the system we were in teaches us that, and we should be super appreciative of it. So I'm going to stop there. I could keep going for hours. Very passionate about this, but we are so lucky. The educational system is fantastic, and we should really take in as much as possible during university. It helps a lot during your professional life.
Thank you so much for those passionate and personal responses. As a student that's involved in extracurriculars and that also works, it's really great to hear that and just to hear how much extracurriculars were able to contribute to your success and inspire your paths. So our next question is, do you think that there are any misconceptions that people have about working in your field? So by this, we mean politics and policy and engagement in education. Many people often look at these fields of work through rose-colored glasses, and what would you say is the most challenging aspect of your job that people might not immediately see? So the order of this question is Alex, Rathika, and Avery.
Sure. So my current role interacts with the public, I would say, on a daily basis. And I think while it's fantastic that that's the case, it can also be sometimes demoralizing because you can have very negative interactions when you get down to the personal level. So in the nitty-gritty, interactions can be negative. And if you're someone who's very passionate about what you're doing, you can feel like it's personal, and you have to grow a pretty thick skin to make it not personal. And remember why you're doing what you're doing and how does it actually build back up. You kind of have to remind yourself that the negative interactions are usually, you know, max 10%, but they're louder and more powerful than all the positive interactions that you do end up having. So I think that's something that you have to learn. It takes a while. You're not ever going to be perfect at it, and it's part of the job. But it's really helpful to remember what you're doing, the bigger thing you're doing, and how each interaction actually can build up to that in the long term.
I think it was me next. Yes, tomorrow? Okay. In the world of politics, oh boy. I think politicians are viewed either as, oh, wow, she's a politician, or it's, she's a politician. She thinks she knows something. She thinks she is better than us. And being a young woman who is also brown in an old white man's world, I was reminded that I was a young woman of color on a regular basis. That would be within the hallowed halls of Parliament. Don't get me wrong, not every old white man is bad. My biggest mentor in the world of politics was an old white man who found me before I found myself in the world of politics, and reached out to me and said, hey, I want you to run. I want you to be part of my team, and I want you to do this because I know that you have the capacity to do what it takes to be a good member of Parliament. And you know, that, going back to our earlier conversation about mentorship, you know, Jack Layton was that mentor for me, who took me under his wing and said he believed in me before I even thought of myself as having the potential to be in public office at that time. I was only 27 years old at that time when I had a conversation with Jack. And the NDP had asked me to run twice before. And I was just like, oh, I can't run, I'm too young. The rose-colored glasses comes, I think, with the media and maybe even people in community possibly holding people up to a pedestal. I had some people who held me up on a pedestal and expected that I was going to be all things to all people. And the reality is that I couldn't be all to everybody. I couldn't be anything to some. And I had to be okay with that. I had to be okay with knowing that I could only be the best version of myself, and that was going to have to be good enough. It wasn't easy. There were many times during my first election campaign, even I made sure that I had a strong woman as my campaign manager, and her assistant was also another strong woman. And then there was me as the candidate, and most of the second, third layer of our team were mostly men, because in the community, I'm Tamil, and in the Tamil community, it's generally men who are involved in politics, and women are quiet about it, even if they have an opinion. My mother, for example, has opinions, but doesn't really say anything because my father speaks our opinion. And I think many people in my generation grew up with witnessing that type of mentality in their homes and in society. And so it was the men who were outwardly involved in politics, and for me as the candidate to have very strong opinions and ideas as to how I wanted my campaign to be, and then my manager to also be a woman. And then there was this other woman who was helping her along. I think we had a lot of power clashes, and those are not seen in the public. If you were to go look at my YouTube channel, you never see a video of where any of the men are going, we don't support her. It's all about, yay, go Rathika. And you get all that positive energy, and that's what you need to see in a political campaign, publicly. But there were many days on that campaign where the three of us just sat there and bawled our faces off going, I can't do this anymore. This is just too much. And then we pick ourselves up, build ourselves back together again, and push ourselves for the next day. Same thing while I was in office. I made a point to hire young women as my staff. There was only one man I hired. It's not that I was against hiring men. If I could find a good woman, a young woman who I could put in these positions to help them get ahead in their career, I wanted to. So if I had candidates and there was a woman, I chose her. And it was a good thing and a bad thing. I had young women who maybe had more experience or education than me in the world of politics, and who felt that they were better than me, who felt that they should be the MP and that I wasn't deserving of it, who would publicly, of course behind my back, sabotage the work that I was doing and building, and would sabotage my reputation because I'm a young woman of color. If their boss was a white man, an old white man, would they have done that? I think Avery's face just answered my question. Not all my employees were like this. There were some, and they would actually have parties or gatherings where they would talk trash about me. And yeah, once I learned, I was so busy because my thing was, remember, there's people who put me up on this pedestal, right? And there's so much expectation of me. Samara, at the start, you're introducing me, and I'm almost, embarrassed when you're saying, the first woman, first person of color. I wasn't actually the youngest in the 41st Parliament. I was the youngest from Ontario, but Pierre-Luc Dussault was actually the actual youngest MP in the 41st Parliament. He was a decade younger than me, by the way. I'm old, I'm sorry. I was the youngest from Ontario. He was from Quebec. Anyway, I don't remember where I was going. I was with all these first and all these expectation on me. It was like I was the first Tamil person to be elected, and so I was expected. This was right at the end, right after 2009, when the civil war in Sri Lanka had come to an end with guns and bombs and shooting. And so after that, a Tamil person being elected to Parliament in the Canadian House of Commons, when Canada was one of the countries that had sympathy and empathy for the Tamil community, there was an expectation that I was going to do something and fix it globally, that I was going to make real change happen on the island of Sri Lanka. And a lot of people had that expectation on me as an opposition MP in Canada. It's impossible. I did a lot of stuff, which was building that awareness, but it's impossible to do everything that people expect of you. I've probably gone on too long on this question, so it's important that you ground yourself with all of these expectations. In the media, especially with young women, I think it was meant in a very lighthearted way, but the microaggressions that happen with media as well is important to recognize. And when I call them out, they're like, oh my gosh, she's so emotional about it. There was a tweet once when I was in the chamber. One of the journalists tweeted about how fierce my lipstick color was that day. And I had just finished speaking in the Parliament and didn't mention anything about the words that had come out of my mouth. The issues that I had spoken about didn't get the media attention, but that my lipstick was fierce that day did. I think it was meant in a positive, go woman kind of way, but still, those are microaggressions that we deal with. And I think the media also treated me, I'm not going to generalize, I know that the media treated me differently than it did many of the other members of Parliament. And that's the national media, the international media, as well as the local ethnic medias that I dealt with. When I was dealing with the Tamil media, they were either extremely supportive and like, go, 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 you're our girl kind of attitude, or it was, well, you're our girl, you're our person, and we expected more of you, and you're really not cutting it. The Chinese media, they loved me because they're like, oh my goodness, this is a person who is kind of like us, but not, but she's doing things and she's very intercultural in the way that she operates. The Caribbean media loved me. The Filipino media loved me because they're like, yeah, she's doing it for us all, because they were looking at the global picture, the bigger picture. So it depends is my, in the end, answer. And that's my answer for everything in life, is it depends. My favorite question is why, and my answer to everything is it depends. Yeah, I'll park it there for now. Avery, your show, let's go.
Well, you gave me a very tough act to follow. That's very challenging to come behind. Your experiences are so valuable, and thank you for sharing both the positives and the negatives to that. I was quickly writing things down as you were saying them, so thank you for sharing all of that. I think the rose-colored glasses is certainly something that I went into my current role wearing. And it's taken me a little while. And again, I come at this from only having really been working for the last year and a half. So very junior in my career, very junior in my company. But I think that some of the things I've observed that might be of value to those who are listening to this call, social impact work, or particularly social impact consulting, which is what I do. There's a lot of people that are there for the work. I don't think you would really go into social impact work if you weren't passionate about the topic, if you weren't actually interested in it. It's almost overwhelming. And I think a lot of us do feel that way. I know myself, I do feel this way all the time. You listen to the media, you watch the news, and you're like, there's so much garbage happening all over the world and so much work to do, that it almost becomes this personal challenge or this guilt of not doing enough, or not contributing in meaningful ways, or only, turning the ship 1 degree. Those sorts of things can really eat away at you. And I think that particularly in social impact work, and there's a huge culture around burnout, that you really show up for the work. But just because you show up for the work doesn't always mean that your manager shows up for you, because maybe they're also showing up for the work, or maybe you're called, everyone's trying to do really interesting work and hopefully you get really good teams. But there are elements of just it not running like a normal business. I really can only speak for mine, and I would never speak ill of it in that way. Like I love what I do and I love my team. But there's a lot of things that, if you worked in a very corporate environment, you clock in at 9, you clock out at 5. And because social impact work is so personal, and is so political, and obviously we know that the personal is political in those ways, you take it home with you. And I think that can be a real challenge sometimes. It's certainly a challenge I find with myself, of actually logging off my computer, because there is so much good work to be done. So I would just caution of going into it with rose-colored glasses, because it is hard work and there is a lot of hard work to be done and it is meaningful. But also your physical and mental health and emotional well-being all matters as well. And you can only show up to do good work when you feel as healthy as you can be, or as whole as you can be. So I don't know, not that that's really a piece of advice, because I'm still working through it myself, and it is the work of a lifetime, unfortunately, to try and figure that out. But I would say, just as maybe an insight to the sector that I work in, it's very challenging and it looks very glamorous in a lot of ways. I think in coming out with flashy reports and having, some of the media presence that some of the projects that I work on do, working with the kind of caliber of clients that I do, it looks very flashy and it looks really exciting. And I used to get to, before COVID, travel a lot for work. And so I think to my direct network as well, it looked very exciting, and it looked very amazing. And, to give you an example, earlier this year in January, I went to the World Economic Forum in Davos, on a client project with the New York Times, which is amazing. But very few, many people on social media saw that I was there, and very few people saw that I was pulling all-nighters and drinking a lot of Red Bull to deliver on the client project that I was there to do, and not certainly saying that is healthy by any stretch of the imagination. But you only kind of see certain things, particularly in the media, so just be critical of that. And then I think the second point, without droning on for too long, around social impact work is just to be quite critical of it. If any of you on the call are, studying development studies, you will know this more than others might. But be critical of the leadership and be critical of the organizations that you work for. Don't undervalue or underestimate your value as a young person, because the ideologies of those who are, in these leadership positions, often might not be the ones that maybe you think are the direction we should go in. They often come up as very expensive PR campaigns, rather than real action. And to hold people accountable in those ways is important, whether it's internally in client relationships, whether it's externally in advocacy in grassroots organizations. Hold leaders and hold people accountable, because there's a lot of good work to be done, but a lot of that good work will be done by young people, and by young people collaborating with those leaders, and by public-private partnerships. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, and nothing by comparison to that of my co-panelists, but that would be kind of my brief insight into the kind of social impact consulting and corporate social responsibility work that I have the privilege of doing.
Wow, thank you so much. Those were really honest answers, and definitely a big reality check into what it's like to work in your fields, and busted a lot of my misconceptions. So thanks. And I'd just like to thank you all for speaking so openly about your experiences. That was the last of our moderated panel questions, and now we're going to be moving into the Q&A portion and taking questions from participants. So once again, you can either use the raise hand function by pressing participants at the bottom of your screen and then raising your hand, or you can send questions into the chat to myself. If you raise your hand to ask a question, please turn on your mic and camera when you're called on, and questions can be directed to any specific panelist or the entire panel together.
This is always the best part. You need the Jeopardy music at this part. It's like,
Absolutely. And Blythe, I noticed your comment. Maya is an aspiring singer. I think she is. So I remind her that she can do anything that she wants to.
Yeah, it was great to get to hear from Maya on the call today. So we have our first question from Megan Devicha. All of you.
Hi, thank you so much, Samara. First of all, thank you so much, Rithika, Alexandra, and Avery, for all your honest answers. I definitely learned a lot. I was taking a lot of notes throughout that, so thank you so much. My question is specifically for Avery. You recently, facilitated the first virtual Women's Forum global meeting, and I was just wondering, what was that experience like from a preparations viewpoint? And I guess a follow-up question would be, what did you learn from holding such a vital position to the conference success? Sorry, I don't know if
Very questions. I like it. Well, thank you for that question, Megan. And I should certainly point out, Megan was a hugely integral part of that Women's Forum team from a content capture perspective. We were very lucky. We brought on a number of students from Queen's University to actually help us with that project. So Megan being one of them. So thank you. To give probably a bit of background to those who might not know actually what it is, one of the main client relationships that I work on and certainly have been working almost solely on for the last several months is the Women's Forum for the Economy and Society, which is a platform organization based in Paris that really seeks to not only look at and bring a gender lens to the issues that disproportionately affect women, but also where women's leadership is, really has the opportunity for outsized change. And so we focus on a number of different thematic areas and intersections of gender and climate, gender and health, gender and business and the supply chains, gender and STEM, and gender and artificial intelligence are kind of key. They're called daring circles, but they're coalition initiatives with an ecosystem of partners, from institutional partners to corporate as well, working on research projects in those intersections to really support women's leadership and identify areas of plausible change for particularly a private sector audience. So the Women's Forum Global meeting actually just wrapped up last Thursday, so I'm still catching up on sleep from it, which is exciting and challenging all at the same time. But it is normally held inside the Carousel du Louvre, so inside the Louvre Museum in Paris, which has been a great privilege to attend in the past, and usually brings together close to 3,000 leaders from all over the world, both as speakers and as delegates, to really dive quite deeply into these thematic issues and issues that sit externally to that as well, including politics and economics, as they all obviously intersect with climate and STEM and all of those issues that I just mentioned. So Megan is right. This was the first year that we were doing it virtually, and we certainly did it virtually in the context of COVID. And so the theme this year was really focused on women's leadership in the recovery, and looking at the different ways in which COVID has disproportionately affected women. So everything from gender-based violence to women's economic empowerment, women entrepreneurs, looking at girls' education in STEM and how COVID is affecting their ability to access STEM skills and upskilling in that way, artificial intelligence and bias. I mean, there's a number of, I could riddle you the whole program. I've unfortunately memorized it in the last month or two. But to answer your question, what was the prep like? The preparation was very challenging. It was a completely new environment. I am not a tech whiz by background. Proficient in Microsoft Office is probably the closest tech thing that I have on my CV. So it was a lot of learning. And what really was challenging this year is, usually when we do it in Paris, in the Carousel du Louvre, when it's in real life, we've been able to staff the team quite strategically with 5-6 people on our team on the Kite side, and then we've got the team in Paris or the client side that has a number of people as well. And as a result of COVID, we've actually had quite a significant loss in resources from a human capital perspective. So we ended up running the project with, on my side, 2.5 people instead of 6. And on the client side, they probably had 5 instead of, 7 or 8. So just as a result of the economic challenges that, we've all been facing as, people move roles naturally and move organizations. So it did put us in a really challenging position where, we basically on my side went from having 2 senior people, a project manager, myself, and another junior person, to having myself and a senior person. So I ended up taking on the role of the project management role, as well as my own role, as well as basically half of another junior person. And then my colleague Grace took on very much both senior roles. So it became quite challenging to navigate in that perspective, because of the challenges of COVID. You're not sitting beside your colleagues in the office. So, quick questions that I had took so much longer to get answered, because my client team is based in Paris, and we, in regular times would be in Paris almost once a week for client meetings with them. We didn't have that. It was all calls this time. Navigating it in my second language is very challenging. All of the forum itself is in English, but because the team is based in Paris and the technical team is based in Paris, that becomes hugely challenging. I mean, my boss is Belgian, so it was easy for her, but a big stretch on my language skills for sure. And then as Megan knows, but a few of you probably don't, I ended up actually going to Paris last week amid a global pandemic and amid a lockdown, both in the United Kingdom and in France, to go and implement the project, and was in a TV studio in the outskirts of Paris with an entire team that spoke French, wearing masks, trying to have my boss on a TV studio, CNN style MC role, and equally trying to get all of these people to connect to these conversations. So it was very challenging. Like I started this rant on about I'm catching up on sleep, and it was a huge learning curve in that way, being kind of catapulted from the junior role that I was into this project management role was a steep learning curve. But the agility that we have all learned in the context of COVID really did serve me well. I kind of went into it, and to be quite candid with you, went into it thinking this project was doomed from the start, because I didn't know what was going to come of it, and because of the lack of resources, and we didn't know what it was going to look like. We've never done it virtually before. We facilitated the first and only ever multi-person New York Times debate online, which I can send you guys the link for afterwards because it's very interesting. And so those things were a lot of firsts and quite groundbreaking in that way. But I had my fingers crossed the entire time that the tech wasn't going to fail us, particularly with the motion of the debate being that technology will save the world. I was pessimistic about it, to say the least. But that was a very long-winded answer. The preparation was challenging, but if COVID has taught us anything, it is that agility and communication are probably the two most important things that you can hold both in your professional life and in your personal life. And just to roll with the punches was kind of how we adopted, managing this project when we went into the COVID context. And I think there's a lot to learn, and there was a lot to learn certainly from the topic areas that we were able to touch on in the ways that women have been disproportionately affected, but where women's leadership in both political and corporate spaces and academic spaces has really been able to transition us into what will hopefully be a more inclusive and green recovery. So lots of positives that came out of it. And if anyone is interested, I'm very happy to connect afterwards, but I don't want to kibosh the rest of this panel because I certainly could talk about it for ages. But thanks, Megan, for that question.
Thank you so much. All right, our next question is from Aloka.
Hi, everyone. So thank you to all the panelists, like just really taking amazing notes from what you're saying. And I think it's really awesome, to be honest, that all 3 of our panelists are from like different, like the NGO and then business and government. And so just kind of a question to anyone as to kind of what do you see as the importance of the collaboration between those 3 sectors being, government, NGOs, and business, and the importance of that collaboration, if there is any, in really driving social change going into the future. I'm not sure if anyone can answer that, but just a question I had.
I'm happy to start. I think collaboration is key between all these different sectors. And I think the way personally I think about it is that, you know, I think most of us on this call are very much driven by the same thing, but we have different skills. And it's almost about finding the best channel or the best mechanism to put those skills to use, to make them as effective as possible. So personally, I studied history and politics. I thought I was going to be a lawyer, and that was going to be my route towards, you know, achieving the things I wanted to achieve and helping in the way I thought I was going to help. But then I tried actually working for the public sector, and I realized that it was hugely frustrating for me, because it just didn't fit my personality and it didn't fit the way I like to do work. Then I tried the sort of startup tech world, and I also didn't really like it there. So then I ended up in sort of more traditional business consulting, and that actually fits with me. So I know that I'm able to be the most effective there. That doesn't mean, though, that I don't collaborate openly with all the other sectors, because I know they have a huge role to play. So I think if everyone is able to apply themselves in the best way in the channel that works best for them, then that collaboration is going to be as fruitful and as impactful as possible. Whereas if we decide that, you know, this is my career path and this is exactly where I need to be, even if it doesn't fit my skill set or I'm not effective here, that's where we kind of do ourselves a disservice. So that's one angle that I find very helpful to think about. Think about your strengths, think about what it is that you want to create impact on, but then also honor your skills and your strengths and make sure that you put them to use in the best way possible.
If I can piggyback on Alex there, Alex talked about individual efficiencies, finding those efficiencies in yourself and leveraging them. And I think Aloka is your name, if I remember, the person who asked the question. You said government, NGOs, and corporate worlds, how could they maybe come together in the future to impact social change? That was where you were headed, and if that's even a possibility. And I think it really is, as the infrastructure component of society, government and even NGOs and the corporate world all add to the infrastructure piece of our society. And without vital infrastructure, without the infrastructure being able to come together and identify our own areas of efficiencies and what is my competitive advantage. So as government, you know, what is it that I do best? As the NGO, what is it that I do best or that we do best? And as corporate world, what is it that we do best? And how could we truly come together to be able to be, as borrowing from what Avery said earlier, as agile as possible, to be able to create the types of change, types of economic change that's going to impact the type of social change that needs to happen for the future of where we want our economy to be and for the future of where we want our global society to be. And I speak in global terms because, yes, we are all within these artificially created political state borders, but we really do have to think as global citizens, as operators within this global world. And it is possible. And as people within these sectors, within the system, who are doing the work, I think we have to remember that it's bigger than you. Remember that, you know, I'm just a little piece of the puzzle. I'm not that big. I'm not that important. The bigger picture is what's important, and what the work that we're doing collectively is important. And if somebody challenges me, so if I'm government and somebody from corporate world or the non-government world challenges me, then stop, take a step back and listen. I think the simple soft skills that we all need to have to be able to see success in whatever our future of work is, active listening is one of those vital soft skills that we all need to have. And as organizations, as infrastructure organizations, whether it's higher education institutions, government, NGOs, businesses, that active listening as a business, as a government, I think is vital to be able to really hone in on how we can really move the country or the world forward.
I would echo both of you in that there is, I fundamentally believe in, and perhaps it's because it's kind of the bread and butter of what I do and what my firm does, but there is a huge space for public-private partnerships, and I am of the opinion that I don't know if we'll get anywhere doing just one or just the other. I think that there's, when we look at public-private partnerships or look at, health programming or community programs, whether that be on quite a global scale or quite narrow in individual communities, there's always going to be questions, and this is maybe, the corporate side of me, of where that funding is coming from. And there are a lot of large organizations that have a lot of money and need to give some of it away, or need to do good things, either for reputational risk, for for tax rebates. There's lots of reasons why large organizations do want to work in private partnerships, and our fingers are crossed that it's with good intent and because they actually want to do good in the world. It doesn't always end up that way, but the thought is hopefully there. And there are ways and lots of examples of how large organizations can work with grassroots organizations, how we can do this in meaningful ways, and how it can be evaluated in meaningful ways, so that it's not just a good PR move for a large organization, but that it positively impacts the community. So I do think that there's a lot of opportunity there, particularly in the way that we're moving because of COVID. We're going to be, governments will be seeing the effects of this from an economic perspective for years and years and years to come, as will individual people and as will businesses. But those kind of large businesses, multilaterals, large international organizations might have the potential to continue investing in community programming and to investing in NGOs and into those partnerships differently than perhaps governments might be able to. So it will be very integral, certainly when we come out of this in hopefully what is an inclusive and green recovery, to leverage those partnerships and those organizations in collaboration with one another, to really drive forward what will be this like new normal, if you will. Although I feel like I've said that so many times now, it's like the most redundant thing ever. But I think that there's a huge space for that. And there will only be an increasingly larger space for public-private, well, so many letters, public-private partnerships.
Thank you so much. Those were very insightful and interesting answers on the intersection between those fields. I know I definitely learned a lot. Our next question is going to Abigail.
Hey guys, so with hindsight in mind, if you could give one piece of advice to yourselves going through university, what do you think it would be?
I think we all have to take a minute to think about that one.
A long time ago for me. Well, I'm in university again now, so.
Yeah, do you mean undergrad? I was gonna say this is like last year for me.
Yes, then undergrad.
Okay, if I could give one piece of advice to myself, take every opportunity that is given to you, and if it's not given to you, make it happen for you, because there are so many things that, because of what you're learning, because of where you are, because of your place of privilege, because of a number of different things, will be, kind of handed to you in ways, and those are great opportunities that you can take. But if you want something different, or you are looking for something else, there are ways to make it happen, and reach out to all the people that you think have cool jobs and the jobs you want to do, and ask them about it, and try everything and learn everything. I've only been out of university a year and a half, and I still feel like every day I'm learning something, or that I equally, on the other side of that hand, know nothing. So it is certainly the work of a lifetime, but yeah, ask a ton of questions and just make opportunities for yourself. The only limit that you have is the ones you impose on yourself, I think.
I think mine would be, don't forget to have fun. Like, I know we've had a very, very serious conversation about ways to learn and how to apply yourself, and how to transition into a career and a professional life. But I think fundamentally, if you approach everything with an open mind and try to have fun in university as you're learning and as you're exploring all these things, I think you're going to do yourself a huge favor, because you're going to find areas and pieces of work and even niche subjects that you can work at while having fun. And I think that's fundamentally so much more valuable than anything else, because you can take that forward and you can take on a hard project or a hard task at hand, but you can learn how to have fun with it. And I think that attracts a tribe around you. And that also just means that you're going to have fun in the long term. Careers are long, right? We're probably going to work until we're like in our 80s or 90s, who knows at this rate. We're going to work for a long time. You're going to work really crazy hours. I know I speak for all of us when I'm sure we've all pulled many all-nighters. I probably pulled more all-nighters in my professional life than my university life. So if you are able to have fun with it, I think that's the most important bit. And it's not always going to be fun, but if you can find ways to have fun while you're working hard, I think university is the perfect time to kind of explore that and figure out those little areas. And then you've learned a skill for a lifetime.
When Avery was talking, I was like, I'm going to take a completely different route. And Alex, I think, took us there partway. So as women, and this panel, I'm sure most of the participants are probably women who are already rocking it, already, just smashing it, just doing amazing work. So remember that. Check yourself in the sense that be kind to yourself, forgive yourself. It's okay for you to rest. It's okay for you to enjoy life. And for women, so I've been saying that I'm back at school. I started my coursework for a PhD in higher education, and I'm working on my research towards, haven't finalized it yet, but women in leadership roles in colleges in Canada. And the thing that's so important for women seems to be passion, to be able to not just get into leadership roles, but to sustain in those leadership roles. And most of our participants are probably already amazing women leaders. So for you to be sustainable in wherever you go, whatever path you choose, make sure you have that passion for what it is you're doing. And when you're passionate about what you're doing, you feel that purpose in what you're doing, you're going to have fun. So the work will be fun, like what Alex was saying, but please remember to rest. I know that you asked about undergrad, right, Abigail? When I was in my undergrad, 3 of my 4 years at Carleton, I was working a full-time job while full-time student. My 4th year, I was working a full-time job, a part-time job, and full-time student. And of course I did my volunteering on top of that. And naturally, make sure you stop and smell those roses, because like Alex said, you're going to be working for a long time. It's only going to get harder. It's not going to get easier. It's not like, okay, I'm done my university, now I get to chill for the rest of my life. No, it's when it starts. That's when the real work starts. So make sure that while you're still in university, take some time to rest and enjoy, have fun. And of course you want to get ahead in your life. So let me give you a little life hack, is do information interviews. If some of you may not know what they are, basically it's identify people who are in positions or roles where you think you want to be. So Alex thought she was going to be a lawyer. Then go find a lawyer who's being or doing what you want to do, and talk to them or talk to their boss. Just reach out to them on LinkedIn and say, hi, I'm a student at Queen's and I'd love to have coffee with you and have an information interview with you. I just want to know what it's like. See if I really do want to do this. And you'll find out. You'll be able to learn really what life is like, for that person anyway, in that role. So please take the time to have information interviews. And the golden rule with information interviews: never ask for a job. It's about talking to them and picking their brain. do not ask for a job, because then you just tricked me into a job interview. So do not do that. That's my life hack.
Thank you so much. That was great advice. Right now we have time for one more question. I just want to say thanks again to all the panelists for being so open and honest and candid. I can definitely speak for everybody when I say that your answers have been incredibly impactful and inspiring. Now our last question goes to Georgia.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Hi, Avery. Thank you so much for all of your like really insightful conversations today. I feel like I've learned a lot. And I think for my question, Avery spoke on this a little bit, but I'd like to hear from everybody. How has the pandemic like really impact your day-to-day work? And do you feel like these changes, whether challenging, negative, or even positive, will be temporary or have the potential to sort of evolve to become more permanent?
Alex, do you want to go, or do you want me to go first?
You go first.
Okay. Well, I'm a professor right now at Centennial College, and I've been working from home since March. So since the first, I think we're going to all shut down all of our higher education institutions, I've been working from home. And I was very conscious in my choices when I set up my tiny little condo here that I was not going to work from home. I was not going to bring work home, and my home space was going to be just for my daughter and I to have our little playground, and that was going to be it. And then all of a sudden, my dining table became my workstation, and I was not happy. It was not ergonomically friendly. I was scrambling. My students were literally in my home all day, every day, and that's not kind of, I'm a very personable person, but I didn't necessarily want them in my home, but it was what it was. And right now I've now set up a desk and workstation in my bedroom. That's why I've got this virtual background. I hate virtual backgrounds, but I don't know if I don't even know who was all here in my bedroom with me. So, we've got a virtual background. So that level of privacy and maybe invasion of privacy goes two ways. For me, I was in the bedrooms of all my students, because let's be honest, most students are renting a room or whatever, and they live out of their one room and then have a common space that they maybe share. So I was in so many people's bedrooms, and I don't know. I had some students who were just like, my spouse is sleeping, so I'm going to keep my camera off today, if that's okay. And it's like, yeah, of course. I don't need to see your spouse sleeping, and I don't think anybody else does. When the daycare's closed, Maya hadn't started school yet. So I am now working full-time from home. I have my young child who also doesn't have any childcare available, who is home, and I'm expected to do the same amount of work and be the same kind of productive, while I'm literally all day long, I was being mother and childcare provider, which, I shouldn't separate that, but because I didn't have any childcare available, I was dealing with Maya all day long. And before and after she slept, I would work. But my classes happened in the daytime while she was awake. So I would literally throw her in front of her iPad or the TV for 3 hours when I was teaching a class. And this was a child who never spent that long of a time in front of a device. Maximum was an hour for her. And all of a sudden she's just sitting there vegetating. And I saw a difference in her quality of life as well, but I couldn't do any better. That was the best that I could do to all of her waking hours to be present for her, except for those windows when I was teaching. And on top of this, I'm a PhD student. So I had to have my classes as well as my doing assignments or reading and writing of stuff. And I would wake up at 6 or 7 at the latest every day, do some prep for my classes, teach my classes, be with Maya. When she went to sleep at 8:30, I would take a break until about 9, and then I would start my work, which was prepping for my classes. Because remember, all of my classes weren't already developed to be online. So I was now modifying all of my delivery for online virtual delivery, where students hated it as well. They didn't want to be online. They wanted that personable face-to-face interaction. And I had to make it the best I could from my kitchen table. And yeah, it's been rough. I think we're finally starting, and mental health was not the best, especially because when the lockdown happened, the first one anyway, I took it very seriously, and I think many people should have. The first 45 days, we didn't even leave our 750 square feet. On day 10, we went outside for a walk because my sisters were on my case going, you need to get outside because standing and playing on the balcony is not enough exercise for you or her. And so we went outside for a walk, and I noticed that people weren't socially distancing. They weren't wearing their mask properly. They weren't doing what they were supposed to. And I just got scared and came back inside. Day 18, second time we went out for a foray, same deal. And I said, nope, 45 days, the two of us stayed inside of our 750 square feet. Even groceries, I got them delivered to me. I took it very seriously because I was not going to put my child's life in harm's way. And she didn't get to make those choices for herself. And so it was rough because all of my family and my physical support network isn't close. And even if they're close, they're about an hour away. So I didn't really have physical humans to even be close by. So it was rough, but really I took a lot of my strength from Maya. Just seeing how resilient she was, and she understood. Having those conversations with her about what is going on, I think helped her process what was going on and why she had to stay inside. She couldn't go outside and play at the park, and she had to play in her sandbox on the balcony. She's privileged that she has a sandbox on the balcony that she could play in. But she accepted, she processed it, internalized it, and then accepted it. And her willingness to adapt really helped me realize that I needed to be more agile and more malleable to this new changing situation. And I drew my inspiration from her, and I think that's what helped me to keep going and continue to keep going. I talked a lot, sorry.
Thank you for sharing that. That's definitely very hard to make calls about other people and other people's well-being, especially in this environment. I'll respond maybe from a business perspective because I think it's kind of interesting. So I currently run an e-scooter mobility for Canada, right? So obviously in the pandemic, they were actually even more important than before the pandemic because people didn't want to go on public transit. And this is basically a way to move around without going on the bus, on the train, etc. But at the same time, I was responsible for over 100 people's well-being. So I had to make sure that we don't have outbreaks in our facilities while providing a safe service to citizens. So I would say this entire year has been extremely stressful from a business perspective, and just the responsibility of feeling like you are directly responsible for so many people's actions day to day, and making sure that they act in the best way possible so that you don't have an outbreak on your hands has been a huge learning experience for me from a business perspective. But I will say that it's also been tremendously rewarding from the service that we provide to citizens, right? So seeing the fact that people were using the service, 3 to 5 times more than before, just because people were so afraid of public transport that they wanted to use the service, also makes you really proud, and it makes you, it is just rewarding, right? To say, hey, in a time of such difficulty, we actually provided something really helpful for people. So whenever you're going through these decisions, just remember that on one hand, you're making really hard calls about, and you're responsible for a lot, but also you are providing something essential or joy to a lot of other people. So I think that this two-sided coin will continue as the pandemic evolves. I think there's going to be different facets of it and different nuances, but I think we're going to have to continue making very hard choices. But we have to remember that when we do that, we also provide a lot of services or a lot of joy or a lot of meaning to others, whether it's teaching or having a scooter or, doing a conference virtually. All these things bring a lot of value. So we need to keep doing them.
I feel like I was really negative through with that response of mine. I'm sorry. It's just, I'm still processing, working through my mental health.
I think we'll be processing for a really long time, to be honest, right?
I completely agree with you. I have learned a lot and grown a lot too through the pandemic. I've had to push myself as an educator and come up with different ways of adapting and making my classes, whether it's synchronous or live classes or asynchronous classes, as engaging as possible so that students actually feel that they're getting value for their money. Not just value for their money, but that they're actually learning what we're saying that their learning outcomes are going to be, that they're meeting those learning outcomes. So we've had to, as professors, as educators, we've had to really work together. We've found new ways of collaborating as faculty so that we are really leaning on one another's strengths and helping one another out throughout the pandemic. As a small business owner, it's opened the world. It's opened up so much more possibility, to be honest, because now everything is virtual. I'm a mediator. My mediation practice it's helped it. The pandemic has helped because now I don't have to do only live in-person mediations. All the mediations are virtual. So it doesn't matter where you are. You can have a conflict in Alberta and I can be your mediator of choice. It does. So now I'm not just restricted to the GTHA geographically. So as a small business, if you are able to, or as a business, if you're able to harness the power of online provision of service, then it really has opened up opportunities that probably weren't available to you before.
I think the only thing that I would add, and I'm conscious that we might be running over time now, by way of a quick story, or to be quite candid with those who are on the line, COVID, though it did change the way that we implemented the Women's Forum Global meeting, it's also probably very important for me to also mention that when COVID hit in May, I was then put on furlough for the month of May. And so though we had this big project coming up in November, the firm that I work for is a women-owned business. It's a small company, arguably with big clients, but with big clients also comes big hammers that slash budgets. And so myself and a number of my junior colleagues were put on furlough, and well, it's called the furlough scheme in the UK, but basically I was laid off, is the way we kind of refer to it in Canada. And that was very challenging. And I think it's very challenging, particularly as quite a junior person, because you take it quite personally. And you seem to be, or it felt like to me, the most dispensable person at the company, that I didn't add value, that I didn't know what I was doing, that I wasn't contributing in the ways that I thought that I was meant to. And so it was, obviously it was, looking back on it now, and hindsight is 2020, a very challenging move for our CEO. And I'm lucky that I was able to come back, but some of my colleagues, have been laid off more long-term. And it's also very okay for that to happen. And it's not a personal thing when that happens. I took it very personally when it happened to me. But it gave me an opportunity to kind of take a step back and actually evaluate, what am I doing? Am I really interested in what I'm doing? There was a huge period of time where, particularly in April and May, we didn't know what the rest of the year was going to look like. I hadn't re-signed a lease in the UK. I didn't know if I was coming back. I had, basically made a plan with the girl that I lived with out here that she would pack up my stuff and send it back to Canada for me if I didn't have a job to go back to. And all of those uncertainties were really, really tricky. And so although, what happened last week with the Women's Forums looks like great success, and I'm very lucky that it was great success, the journey to that was equally very challenging. So to kind of reiterate what Alexandra and what Rathika have mentioned, that agility and being able to just transition from one thing to the other and taking care of yourself and really, you know, taking a step back and figuring out what it is that interests you, how you can provide, you know, support to your employee, like to your work, to your community. All of those different things is equally very important. So COVID, I don't think is going away anytime particularly soon. And like I said, we will see kind of the economic impacts of this for quite some time, but, you know, take it as an opportunity to figure out what you really like, to pick up a hobby that you didn't do. I started watercolor painting, which I haven't done since I was 8, in May, and just made really nice, fun homemade cards, which I really like. But it doesn't, you know, being laid off from a job doesn't have to be always the worst thing. I know Rathika mentioned it when you were, you know, your contract was not renewed, and it was an opportunity for you to do something different. COVID has unfortunately presented that circumstance to so many people, but hopefully we can pivot in those ways to learn new skills, to try new things, and or to look at a job or an industry that we didn't particularly, you know, think we would go into. So just to be quite candid, you know, though last week was very exciting and looked very fun and flashy on social media, May was very tricky in terms of trying to navigate my own employment and my experience in COVID, being, you know, very junior at a company. So I thought that was perhaps an important nuance to make, that it is not always rainbows and sunshine and all that hard work that I was glamorizing. It can also be many long days of trying to figure out how to watercolor paint and walking my dog 4 times a day. Because I came back to Canada actually for 4 months in COVID, and was lucky that I had the ability to do that from a flexible working environment. And then, like I said, was off for part of it. So, but yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing your different experiences and how it's impacted you, and all that great advice. Unfortunately, we are over time, so we can't get to any more questions, but I would just like to thank everybody for attending the QSAA Women of Influence event. These conversations were incredible, and I wish that we could carry them on. They were really engaging, and it meant so much to have 3 incredible, remarkable professional women here today. After this event, all participants will be getting an email sent to your Queen's email with a survey that we ask you to complete. And once again, we would just like to thank all the panelists and the participants for coming. We hope that you all have a safe and successful end of term.
Well, thank you for having us, Samara, and for the whole committee. You guys are unreal, and thanks for those who tuned in.
Thanks for organizing.
Thank you. Yeah.
Great work.
Good conversation, and hopefully these conversations continue.